Hi, Alex Recaps here. Today I am going to explain a movie called Rain on Fire. The film, based on a true story, tells the story of a young girl named Susan Collins. The career of an aspiring journalist went up steeply, and soon she found herself in a well-known print publication in New York. Trying to cope with her work as best as possible, the girl constantly turns to her boss Richard for help. He does not always have free time, so her colleague and best friend Margot comes to the aid of Susan. Girl's personal life is also fine because she has a beloved person named Stephen. The novice musician is a decent person and sincerely in love with his chosen one. Their relationship cannot be called an easy affair because they have common goals and plans. On her 21st birthday, Susan decides to introduce Stephen to her parents, who are now divorced. Tom is the girl's father, who is skeptical about the choice of his daughter because Stephen seems to him not as serious and windy guy. During a birthday party, the family asks Susan to blow out the candles, but she's unable to do so as she feels a sudden rush of weakness that restricts her movements. The momentary turbidity passes and the girl has a great evening in a bar where Stephen sings. A couple of days later, Richard entrusts a young journalist with a new assignment, according to which she must interview a controversial center. Girl again feels weak and sits on a chair. To recover, Richard doesn't have time for her and asks Susanna to leave his office as soon as possible. Weakness and cough continue to pester the girl, making it difficult to concentrate on the article. Upon returning home, Susan was never able to start writing material for the next few days. She looks confused, has little control over her actions, and feels depressed. After scratching her hand, she notices bite marks on her body and assumes that she was bitten by how sick. Susan arrives at work and shows the bites to her friend, but Margaret sees no marks. A little later, Richard calls the journalist to his place and yells at the girl as she was several days late in submitting the article. The next morning, due to weakness, Susan is unable to get out of bed and is late for the meeting. Once in the office, she again feels unwell and hides under the table to talk with boyfriend. Stephen reassures his beloved and asks not to wind herself up, but Susan understands that something is clearly wrong with her. The girl decides to go to the doctor and he conducts a series of tests. Susanna seems to be completely healthy, but the man offers to do an MRI to rule out terrible diagnosis. A couple of days later, the doctor calls back and says that all the tests are clean and the girl is absolutely healthy. While at our apartment, Susan hears water dripping from the tap and it terribly annoys her. She invites her father home to fix the faucet, but Tom doesn't see the dripping water. He is embarrassed by the conditions in which his daughter lives because there is a mess around and an unpleasant smell reigns in the house. After seeing off her father, Susan returns but confuses the parties and tries to enter someone else's apartment. The next morning, the journalist goes to work and learns that the senator has come to give an interview. She completely forgot about the meeting and didn't prepare the questions, so she decides to improvise. During the conversation, Susan's behavior becomes more and more inadequate and the official decides to terminate the interview ahead of time. Richard is furious about what happened because the senator's agent communicates with influential people, and after such a situation, not a single self-respecting star will come to their publication. The boss is concerned about Susan's behavior and communicates with Margaret to understand what is going on with her colleague. Every minute, the girl's actions become more and more strange. Others do not know how to react to what is happening and how to help her. At night, Susan has a seizure and a frightened Stephen takes the girl to the hospital. Doctors diagnose apoplexy, but the threat passed and Susan was allowed to go home. In the morning, parents come to their daughter's house who are outraged that Stephen did not call them. The guy was very scared and confused. He feels guilty and apologizes for his rash actions. Susanna's mother decides to take her daughter to her so that she can be under her supervision. Ronan notices that the girl's behavior is becoming more and more inadequate. She hears what no one says and looks as if through people, not noticing anyone in front of her. At some point, Susan has another attack and her mother calls the hospital. Careful checks and analyses do not give any results. The doctor suggests that this is the usual fatigue of a girl who has begun adulthood and is torn between home and work. Susan tries to return to normal life, but her condition continues to deteriorate. Girl does not see her reflection in the mirror, and ordinary sounds drive Susanna out of herself because they amplify 100-fold in her head. After a couple of epileptic seizures, Susanna visits a new doctor and shares her assumptions with him. She has read articles on the internet and suggests that is bipolar disorder. The doctor suggests that Susan is suffering from a manic depressive disorder that could lead to a split personality, but it's too early to panic. Upon returning home, girl refuses to take the medicine prescribed by the doctor because it has a lot of side effects. The mother insists that her daughter take the pills and she agrees, but in which case she asks to be buried next to her grandmother. Rona is tired of her daughter and, having met with her ex-husband, offers Tom to take Susanna to him and look at her behavior. Man is sure that everything is not so bad, but on the very first day, daughter attacks his new wife with reproaches. She hears the words of the woman, although she says nothing, and literally goes crazy hiding in a corner. Tom decides to help his daughter and meets with the doctor, insisting on Susan's hospitalization. Soon girl ends up in the hospital and the doctors try to talk to her in order to understand the psychological state of the patient. Susan hears reproachful voices on TV, knows what other hospital workers are saying about her. It makes her crazy. The girl does not want to lie on the bed and tries to escape, but she is held by force. Steven visits Susan and leaves her a player so that she can listen his music and get some distraction from what is happening. During a conversation with Dr. Khan, girl shares her assumptions about a possible diagnosis. In the evening she again tries to escape, but the hospital workers stop Susanna and chain her to the bed. The next morning she woke up in an unfamiliar place. Looking around, Susan can't remember how she ended up in the hospital, and the fact that she's tied to a bed scares her even more. Doctors continue to carefully examine the patient and make sure that she is physically healthy. They suggest that the girl has post-seizure psychosis or schizophrenia, but in both cases she needs to be placed in a psychiatric hospital because ordinary doctors are powerless here. Steven continues to visit Susan and support his beloved in every possible way. Tom sees the guy's attitude towards his daughter and softens his attitude towards him. Student girl experiences another seizure, after which her condition worsens. Susan practically does not speak, and having been a war colleague in front of her, does not react in any way to the appearance of Marga. The girl came to give a card with best wishes and asked her friend to get well because she misses her very much. Leaving the room, Margaret cries, realizing that Susan is sick and no one can help her. A few days later, a group of doctors report that they have not been able to make a correct diagnosis. They have different points of view, but everyone agreed that Susan should be placed in a psychiatric hospital soon. Doctors diagnose complete catatonia, a movement disorder, and immobilization with constant muscle tension. Parents and Stephen do not agree with this and beg to help them because girl is quite normal and she needs the help of psychiatrists. Dr. Kant doubts the diagnosis and assumptions, so he decides to turn to Najjar, a brilliant luminary in the field of medicine who began teaching at the university. Having learned all the symptoms, the man became interested in a case and agreed to look at Susanna. Dr. Najjar proceeds to a thorough research and conducts a series of tests, but they do not give any result. He soon notices that there is something strange in Susan's behavior and invites her to draw a clocked face by writing the numbers from 1 to 12. The girl complies with the request but places all the numbers on the right side. Sometime later, the doctor analyzes the results of the test and comes to the conclusion that Susan has a form of encephalitis that caused inflammation of the brain. The right hemisphere responsible for the left side of the body is inflamed and the girl's mind is at risk. Her own body and antibodies are constantly attacking, and Susan's mind is literally on fire. At the same time, Major is glad that he was able to diagnose the disease at an early stage because he's able to help the girl. Doctors took part of the brain for analysis, and having confirmed the assumptions, they were finally able to prescribe the appropriate treatment. Sometime later, Susan recovered and returned home. She had to relearn how to walk and talk, enjoy life, and write. The girl we enter experience all the feelings and emotions as if for the first time, but the recovery was quick and quite successful. 7 months later, she returned to work at the publishing house and received a new order from Richard to write an article about her illness. Susan became the 217th person in history with a similar disease. Thanks to her article, millions of people around the world have learned about the disease and its treatment methods. Dr. Niger opened the first special clinic and continued to help people over the years. He saved thousands of lives and became Susanna's best friend. Continuing to work, the girl became a brilliant journalist, and in 2015 she married Stephen. Hair movie ends. Thank you for watching and see you tomorrow at the same time.